Hello everyone, welcome to Fanfic Fridays. It's a little bit of a late upload, but I don't have enough people following me right now, so to really care. Anyways, today's fanfic, I'm just gonna jump right into it, is one I found on Tumblr. And I'm gonna be honest here, I'm shipping trash. I am. So all I did is I went onto Tumblr, I typed in fanfic, shipping, and then just looked through it for a bit until I found this. And originally there was a comic, and this is actually a fanfic about a comic. And it's a Miraculous Ladybug, which I've actually seen Miraculous Ladybug, and it's actually a very good show. I highly recommend it to anyone. Literally anyone. And, well, without any further ado, let's get to it. This is by LadyNoir. Oh goodness. I've not actually read this yet, but I've read the comic it's about, so who knows. A little foreword from the author. So this is the kind of thing that happens to me when I'm really bored and have an excess of general Miraculous Ladybug feels. Enjoy. When Ladybug stumbled towards him before promptly fainting into his arms after a particularly difficult midnight Akuma battle, LadyNoir wasn't particularly surprised. They've had to fight at night a lot more recently, and they couldn't just sleep extra because they'd been up saving Paris all night. For neither of them was this their whole life. They had commitments, obligations in their normal lives, and that doesn't lend itself to midnight battles. So, even though Chat was tired enough that he would have happily settled on the ground with her and slept then and there, he gently lifted her in his arms, her sleeping form easy to manipulate into a comfortable hold. Slowly, he started making his way through Paris, towards what he knew was Ladybug's home. He'd known that Marionette was Ladybug for a while, but he hadn't said anything to her. Why? Because for both of them, their superhero alter egos were somewhere where they could be someone else. Someone slightly better. And anyway, as Ladybug and LadyNoir, they made a good team. But as Adrien and Marionette, well, they're both awkward and clumsy and shy. He didn't want to disrupt the dynamic of their team with any of that. There was a certain element of him just being scared of her reaction too, of course. But that wasn't the main reason for not mentioning that he knew her identity, was it? Nearly halfway through the journey, which was taking a rather long time on account of their having to take back streets to avoid being spotted, Ladybug stirred, not fully waking up, but awake enough to wind her arms around Chat's neck as he carried her, and to bury her head in that little hollow between his neck and shoulder. There was a little voice in the back of her mind telling her that this was a bad idea, but she ignored it. In her tired state, "I'm just making it easier for him to carry me," was what she told herself, but as she drifted between sleep and wakefulness, she couldn't help thinking that this position, snuggled up against Chat, was really comfortable, and that he smelled really nice. It had been comfortable snuggled up against Chat, but not this comfortable, and no, the warmth was retreating too. Ladybug forced her eyes open and blinked once, twice. It was dark, and she couldn't see anything other than LadyNoir slowly moving away. She tried to force her mouth to work, to stage some protest towards his leaving. He's so warm and comfortable. All that she managed was a mangled mumbling sound, but all the same it got his attention and he stopped moving away. "Sorry, didn't mean to wake you." His voice washed over her, bringing her further away from sleep. But she still wasn't awake enough to deny that his voice was lovely. Her own voice returned, but she still sounded like she wasn't properly awake. She rolled towards him, glancing up, but unable to meet his eyes. "Heading out?" she asked. Her voice almost sounded regretful, and Chat couldn't help himself. He was back beside her in a flash, his arm wrapped around her shoulders. He bent his head close to hers, and his voice had the same slightly regretful quality. "Yeah, it's late." Ladybug bit her lip, uncertain. She knew it was a bad idea, but she didn't want to see him leave. Might as well ask, but she stumbled over the words, much more Marionette than Ladybug in the moment. You look tired, and it's dark out. Maybe heading back now isn't the best idea." Just then, he yawned, and with his head as close to her as it was, his warm breath tickled her cheek, coaxing out a sleepy giggle. His breath was still warm on her cheek, he replied, in a voice that had grown husky with tiredness. Well, what do you propose? His voice sent a shiver down her spine, making her reply a little bolder than her initial question. Take a quick nap here, before heading out when it's brighter and you've got more sleep. She was glad for the darkness, as it hid the blush that was quickly climbing on her cheeks. She was much more awake now, and almost hoping he refused. She was embarrassed over her earlier recklessness. She knew he wouldn't refuse, though, and when he spoke again, she was unsurprised. Sounds amazing. A pause. Scooch over a little? She didn't, instead grabbing both his hands and pulling him down in front of her, wrapping her arms around his chest and burying her face in his neck. He stiffened for a second, and her breath caught, as her mind groped for an explanation, but just as quickly he relaxed again, his hands coming up to enclose hers right beside the heart. Okay, I'm gonna stop here for a second, and I'm really gonna say this. It said it wasn't NSFW. I swear. I have no idea what's gonna happen next. I swear I don't think it's NSFW, though. This is my first reading. Okay. They were both asleep within minutes. Oh, thank goodness. Matching each other breath for breath. Okay, so it's not... Okay, I'm sorry about this interruption, then. Marionette, wake up. I have something to tell you. Alya's voice roused her. But it wasn't the first thing she noticed when she woke. The first thing she noticed were that her head didn't rest on a pillow. Rather, it was cushioned on a remarkably warm, comfortable chest, and that her hand was being clutched tightly by the owner of said chest. And although this was definitely a confusing and unusual occurrence, she felt safe and comforted. Her head was dislodged as the person next to her sat up, making a noise of confusion, and Marionette rolled her head to the side and blinked a couple of times, her voice still muddied from sleep. Alya? It was a question, not a statement, but however it was intended, and however it turned out, Alya didn't notice, because her exclamation of, "Holy poop!" was louder than whatever Marionette managed to make. And then Alya started laughing, quickly joined by the tinny sound of Nino's laughter through the phone. Marionette groaned, and grabbed a pillow, throwing it at her, and sang as loudly as possible, "Out! Out! 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 Out!" Alya obliged, and quickly exited the room, closing the door just in time to stop the pillow from following her down the stairs. Her laughter could still be heard as she left the house and walked down the street. Amazingly, she still hadn't turned her head to look at her remaining companion, because she remembered last night, and her cheeks were burning in embarrassment. And she realized that if she was Marionette, and no longer transformed as Ladybug, then whoever it was over there on the other side of her bed, whoever it was who still had a firm grip on her hand, and was rubbing it in a way that was making her whole body tingle, and her heart beat 1,000,000 miles an hour. Whoever that was, it was the civilian form of Chat Noir, and she wasn't sure she was ready to know. So, her face remained hidden, as the boy next to her kept working his magic on her, igniting her skin with his touch, and stopping her heart. After a couple of minutes, he seemed to get worried. "Marionette? My lady? Princess? Ladybug? Bugaboo?" His voice was tinged with worry, or maybe it was concern. She couldn't quite tell. She turned her head to the side, the one she knew he wasn't on, and replied, her voice a grumpy-sounding mumble. "Can you just go?" She heard a quick intake of breath from behind her, and rushed to explain to herself. "I mean, I don't want to know who you are. I don't want anything to change." The last part was but a whisper, but she knew he heard her just the same. "Alas, Alya will probably ask you what I was doing in your bed this morning, and it's probably best if you know who she's talking about. Less suspicious, no?" She squeezed her eyes shut and let out a resigned sigh. She needed to know who this was, and not a moment too soon, as she was immediately rolled towards him by the hand that he was still holding. She vaguely wondered if whatever he was doing with her hand was legal, because it was still making her spine tingle. The voice came again, this time a whisper, close to her ear. 3, 2, 1, open! And, almost against her will, her eyes fluttered open. She blinked a couple of times, making sure that what she was seeing was real. Adrian? She stumbled slightly over his name, and it sounded like a question, but Adrian just smirked, something that looked out of place on him, but was commonplace on Chat, and with nonchalant shrug, replied with a single word. Surprise. She eyed him for a second, before settling on the only solid thing she could at that moment. You don't seem particularly surprised by who I am. It was a statement, not a question, but he answered her anyways. Yeah, I've, known for a while. He trailed off, for the first time, sounding unsure of himself. She had so many questions. There were so many things they needed to discuss, but he still had her hold of her hand, and there was something that she was wondering about that seemed to her, in that moment, more important than anything else. So she used their linked hands to pull herself closer to him, and when she tilted her face upwards to kiss him, he was already there, and soon his hand was gone from hers, because his hand was elsewhere, pulling her closer, and she didn't mind, because it meant she could bring up her own hands, and run them through his hair, and she felt like exploding with the sensations, her veins, her skin. They were fire and ice, feather and fireworks, warmth and cool, floating and explosions, and they both wondered why anyone who'd found something like this would ever give it up, would ever stop. And so they didn't. Not for a very long while. Well then, that was... It was good. It was well written. I found very few typos, I gotta say, and I think that it was a very good personification of their traits from the actual show. A little bit more romantic than I think would actually go down. I really think that the actual thing would have been a bit sillier than that. Certainly Marionette would have never invited Chat Noir actually into her bed, unless this was much farther down the road than what the episodes currently are at, so there's that. But otherwise, I enjoyed it a bit. I am the worst of the shipping trash, so... it's good stuff. I especially enjoyed Alya's reaction to it all, because I did not say exactly what she said due to the fact that I don't want to say anything on this show that I couldn't repeat in front of my grandmother. Let's just say that. Anyways, thank you all for watching. I hope you all have a wonderful day. There will be links into the description for this fanfiction. And everyone, have a wonderful day, wonderful night, wherever you are.